Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from our Operation GCD Fridaze with our introduction from everyone's favorite multi-state mind control transpocalypse assassin, my old wannabe PR rep and stalker, Buffalo Jared Revisa, fellow who wanted to stab you a bunch and wear my skin as a human coat, and turns out someone did hire him as his PR rep, and he did get stabbed a bunch. So anyhow, thanks again for joining us here tonight, or joining me here tonight, folks, over the interwebs to get a little GCD. Once again, JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD. More importantly, not the vice president. And I won't belabor the stabbings here any further here this evening. Welcome our guest, Jeff, Badgerlands Legends Jeff. Greetings, sir. Welcome to Operation GCD.
Greetings. Thanks so much for having me, JJ. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation. You're a man. We've met through our mutual parties, or mutual friend, Recluse over there at the farm, Stephen Snyder. And much like Stephen there, we think our common trend amongst all three of us is we all enjoy adventures and high weirdness. So
yes.
I've heard some tales of your journeys in high weirdness with Recluse, and I believe you've heard some of mine as I've shared them on the farm, at least there with
absolutely. Yep, and on the rejects too.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. Yep. I like to, one of the things here at Operation GCD, sir, Operation Garbage Can, dude. That is, that's me here. I like to, have adventures. I've always been a big fan of adventures, and I've always found high weirdness on those adventures.
Yeah. And I think one thing that me, you, and Stephen can all agree on is Wisconsin is weird.
You ain't kidding, sir. And apparently the sus factor in Wisconsin increases significantly when I show up. But I have spent a lot of time in that state, and I do agree with you. It is kind of odd.
Definitely, yeah. And ever since the mound builders started their works in Wisconsin, we had the wave of French explorers, followed by where we get the name Wisconsin Badgers, the people that actually dug out the lead ore. It's been a weird freaking place.
Yeah, so you basically have been tracking these trends of the ancient Americas and high weirdness of your home state of Wisconsin and documenting on a blog, right? Badgerlands Legends?
Badgerland Legends, Instagram, Facebook is where you can find everything I do. So I cover everything from, the people, places, the things that make Wisconsin weird and legendary.
Right.
So
yeah, it is. That's a good point, because that's one of my theories, sir. Is when you're dealing with these mounds, I have a general theory that weird shit. It's a very technical term. Weird shit happens in and around these mounds.
Yeah, definitely. And
Wisconsin has a lot of those examples, right?
So yeah, when Europeans first discovered this land, there was probably somewhere between, I believe it was like 15 and 20,000 mounds. And the very interesting thing about Wisconsin's mound is it's the kind of the epicenter of the effigy mound building complex.
Yes, so that's a very salient characteristic, I think, to understand the high weirdness of it, because it has the highest concentration of effigy mounds in the entire world.
Yeah,
in Wisconsin.
Yep, and right where I'm sitting right now is called the Four Lakes region, and that is the regions around the capital of Wisconsin, Madison. And there are so many mounds that people don't even know about. I actually had a friend that I made through my son. My son's in kindergarten now, and he made a friend, and we got invited over to their new house. They built it during the pandemic. And while they were kind of surveying the land and getting ready to break ground, they found a bird effigy on the lot line. It was well documented by the Historical Society, but they were, of course, very wary of building anything near that mound, both the new homeowners and also the Historical Society, the Archaeological Society, that they had to bring in an archaeologist on site when they actually did some digging and did some surveying and put in one of the electrical boxes that is right near the head of that bird mound. So something that is still very prominent feature in the landscape, but most people walk by them. They're in all of our city parks. They're all in all of our county parks here in Wisconsin, and people will literally stumble over them without realizing that here, here is an effigy mound or linear mound, or like in their backyard, they have 2 conical mounds and a bird mound. So, uh, a really unique characteristic of the landscape, especially around the Madison area.
Oh, dude, for sure. And again, I'm sure you've documented this as well. You're making some interesting points there. I would like to put a couple notes on there, sir, because I'm sure you've concluded this as well in that journey you've taken in the history of Wisconsin. Realize that a lot of notable sites and buildings are constructed on top of these mounds,
Yes. Yes. One thing
like
that
the state
I
capitol, right?
absolutely, the state capitol, when it was cleared to make that site, they had to clear several of the mounds. I reached out to the Historical Society looking to research this further, and they didn't have the specific records because they were, kind of lost to time, or they weren't as well documented when they built Madison's first capitol, and that was way back in like the 1840s. So
Yeah, I was going
any
to guess what year was that? 1841 or so,
yeah,
1842.
so the official statehood was 1848, but that's when Madison and the University of Madison and the state were all founded, and also the University of Madison. So the two highest elevations in Madison are both the Capitol Square and also Bascom Hill, which is the University Hill, which they first constructed that on. So
That's another
had,
common trend we see, right? So universities are another notable place built
mhm,
upon mound
mhm,
sites. So with these state capitals, though, this was a project. This was a nationwide project. So in we'll call it circa 1803, they built a state capitol house. They're a small structure, wooden structure
mhm,
in Chillicothe, Ohio, which is the epicenter of the Adena mounds, right? So
mhm,
I tell folks, if you want to look where those are the effigy mounds up by you. Those are slightly different mounds. You do have Adena mounds up there, and we have effigy mounds here, but you all have more effigy mounds than Adena, and we got more Adena than effigy in
mhm,
Ohio. So in the Ohio River Valley, that is. And when you look at a map of the Adena mounds, because you're right, a lot of them have been destroyed. A lot of them, there's very sparse records, right? There's some maps. There's, thanks to the Society of the Cincinnati, the folks that started America, that secret society of George Washington's there. They're the folks that primary reason we have any knowledge of these mounds and the maps and surveys they conducted. So, and on that effort, we see a lot of patterns around these activities when they start building on these mound sites for each state capital. So the 16-year-old carpenter on that project, I believe you're 16, 15, was later. That was the first mound capital. It's Ohio, right? It's the first, it's the Northwest Territory. It's the new America, right?
mhm. Yep.
And they built that on mound. And then in 1838, Joseph Vance Jr., kinfolk of mine, he was the 13th governor of Ohio. He would move that mound site to Columbus, where it is today. They put it on, the state capital, put on a mound site in Columbus, where it sits today. They took apart the earthworks there, the mound, and constructed the cornerstone out of the earthen material from the earthworks that sits today in Columbus, Ohio, as the at the state capitol building on a mound site. And again, the mound is the cornerstone of that building. Now, the Chillicothe original state capital of Ohio, the carpenter, he would later be the territorial governor for Jefferson County, Denver, Colorado. He would also build his first territorial governor state house there in Jefferson County on a mound. So he was involved all the way in between those two dates. So that's like I think that's about 1848. We're talking out in Denver. So between 1803 and 1848, every state capital is built on a mound, and many, many county buildings as well.
And I focus mostly on Wisconsin. So knowing Wisconsin's history with that, I guess it really doesn't surprise me.
Right. So that's a verbose and long-winded statement to ask you. Have you seen that same trend with the county buildings in Wisconsin? So I haven't done a lot of study on that. I know that applies to folks or states like Ohio,
Mhm,
Illinois, Iowa, Arkansas, as I call it,
mhm.
and Texas.
That's something that I should really look into. I know in Wisconsin we have counties, we have county seats, but you can't shake a stick without hitting an Indian mound, effigy mound, burial mound in Wisconsin. So it really wouldn't surprise me if these were all connected as far as that. And I know, just to kind of hit that trifecta between you got universities, you got the state house, or the current Wisconsin Capitol, which was or the Mounds were displaced to build that Capitol. There's also the most prominent, maybe one of the most prominent mound groups in Madison is actually on the Mendota mental health asylums grounds. That same grounds
Yeah, right. That's a common
where
trend, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know you're
Just
probably
put prisons and asylums on these locations. That's not weird.
yeah. I know you're probably a big fan of Pennywise from that area of the country. Have you listened to the
Yeah,
Pennywise
well, I am a
podcast?
New Englander, sir, by birth. So I mean, I
Okay.
am a Northern Appalachian and Southern Appalachian, half and half there.
Okay.
Well, however you want to cut it. But
But
yeah, I mean, I am familiar with, and it's interesting you mention that because it is these tales, looking back at how these, in folklore and whatnot and pop culture, how these matters get perpetrated and these ideas get perpetrated. We do see a lot of stuff in these horror films of the 80s of a group of writers and film directors, whatnot, doing films and writing books about things on mounds. Stephen King, Steven Spielberg, a lot of Stevens.
yeah. Oh, I said Pennywise. I meant Pennyroyal podcast.
Oh, all right. Well, you
Nathan
said
Paul Isaac. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of his work, sir, as well. Yes, but
Yeah.
I thought you were going the route of Stephen King and all these weird mound stories. He's always everything he goes around has got. Even The Shining, dude, that's got mounds. That's built on mounds.
It's crazy.
Yeah. If I've learned anything from watching and reading and watching Stephen King's works and Steven Spielberg's is, again, weird shit happens in around mounds, but that is the ideas perpetrated in their works.
Now,
Poltergeist, Pet Cemetery. I can go on for a while here, sir.
Yeah. In our pre-show, pre-show talk, we talked a little about the Wisconsin Dogman. So Wisconsin Dogman is known best as the Beast of Bray Road, being the road that the majority of the sightings of that beast were found on. Well, the interesting thing about that is the Beast of Bray Road, that really gained popularity in the early 90s when a actual local writer to that area, she published a piece in just a small rag local publication. And for some reason, it got picked up in syndication. And everybody from Hard Copy and Current Affair came to Bray Road to do a little segment on it. But the interesting thing about that is, it popped off in the 90s, but one of the earliest stories actually comes from the 1930s, and it happened at a Catholic convent. And you're going to love this because there's a tie into this. So this Catholic convent.
Oh, yes, sir. This is a great tale. This is some great stuff. Folks should really enjoy this one.
Yeah, it's called St. Coletta's. It's in Jefferson, Wisconsin. It's the next county over from Walworth County, where the Walworth County werewolf or the Beast of Bray Road resides. Well, anyways, there was a night watchman, 1936. Yeah, you got it up. So 1936 at St. Coletta's. Yep, you're going to it. A night watchman by the name of, I believe his name is Shackleton. He was on the grounds surveying, just doing his normal patrol, and he came upon one of the mounds that was on the property, and he had seen a large beast scratching at the top of this burial mound. Well, he walked near it and he spooked it, and it skittered off. Well, he had to work the next night, and that next night he goes back, same place, same time, equipped with nothing more than a flashlight, and he encounters this same beast at that same place. But this time it doesn't slink off. It actually rears up to him. And he said that he said a prayer in his head for God to save him. And then the thing actually got down back onto four legs and skittered off. But the one more notable thing about that specific St. Coletta's, which you're pulling up right now, is that it was the home of Rosemary Kennedy. Now,
they gave her the old eyes in there, right?
Gave her the old ice pick lobotomy.
Right in your brain hole there. You're out of here, lady.
Yeah, Joe Kennedy, he maimed and disabled his daughter. And it's a tragic tale of that family, which has been marred by so much tragedy still to today. So
and they did it on a mound site. What's going on with that, sir?
I don't know if they did the actual lobotomy there, but that's where she was to live out her days.
My understanding is it occurred at that location as well.
Okay, I'll have to do some more research on
I will also do some more research, but it
Okay.
is weird, these activities again. So you were mentioning Linda Godfrey and her work on the Beast of Bray Road and everything, and how this was an earlier sighting. I remember she actually interviewed that man's son, the night watchman's son.
Yep. That's where this tale first came to her, was because, you know, the father told it to the son, and the father felt crazy even telling it. And then, you know,
I mean, right?
the son, he had heard about Linda's work and said, well, you know, my dad actually had a sighting there, and told Linda about that, and she published it in the book, The Beast of Bray Road. So that's the very first sighting right there on a mound site.
I know, dude. So and furthermore, she went on to study the more sightings of this dogman activity,
Mm-hmm.
and I like where her brain hole was, because she's no longer with us. She passed away a few years ago, right?
Yeah, 22.
So she did a great study at starting to correlate these activities and understand that there's something weird going on here, because all these dogman sightings correlate with mound sites.
Yes, and it was so prominent that when she started doing this research, she found that the animal control officer right there in Elkhorn being the epicenter of the phenomenon, he actually had a manila folder on his desk called Werewolf. So she got to see the werewolf folder, where people would come in and say, hey, I saw this upright walking dog in that area. And, you know, the cool thing about that is the new custodian of that property, where a lot of that high strangeness occurs on, his name's Lee Hample. He is more than willing to let people come out there. And I actually, my friend grew up on that property, and his dad had the farm there before Lee took it over. And he had kind of a birthday ranger there a couple years ago. So I got to kind of explore the property at night, pitch my tent, and spend the night on the property. I didn't have any profound experiences, but it was cool to at least walk in the steps, walk into Lee's barn, and review all of the evidence he collected, hundreds, maybe thousands of photos from trail cams, different still photographs that he caught of weird aerial phenomena, just a potpourri of high strangeness from that property. And I don't know what to make of it, but I feel like the Indian burial mounds have something to do with it. Definitely have a tie to it.
Oh, dude, for sure. And we see these direct ties, but not just the state capitals, the county buildings, other notable sites of interest, insane asylums, prisons. You know, we see that in these circumstances that the matters around these mounds and the sites and whatnot are all established by folks of the Society of Cincinnati, who get land grants from the Revolutionary War Service and then settle in that region. And we get names. A lot of them are from New England and stuff like that. And we see a lot of that, a lot of the namesake as a result of that, right?
Yeah. So the person I'm wondering about now is a guy by the name of Increase Lapham. He was Wisconsin's first real archaeologist. He was kind of a jack of all trades. He actually was the person who was instrumental in starting the National Weather Service, and actually issued the first national weather broadcast from a place that is now called after his namesake, Latham Peak in Waukesha County. So I'm really interested on maybe digging a little deeper into his backstory and seeing if he had any connections to the Cincinnatus.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this character. You're gonna have to describe a little bit more to me. Sounds like an interesting character.
Yeah. So Increase Latham. Why don't you pull him up on Wikipedia? It should be Increase, just like the word Lapham, Lapham. Lapham.
Yeah. That's a ridiculous name, sir. I'm gonna have to recommend this guy changes his name, because I thought you were making his name up at first. I thought it was a name.
His real name.
Oh, I see. It's a real name. It's still ridiculous though.
Absolutely.
Like Increase Lapham. I'm like, what's going on right now? Did I just have a seizure? What's going on right now?
Yeah, so he was born in Palmyra, New York, and then made his way.
Oh shit! All right, well there you go.
So family
and
moved
he's
to Pennsylvania.
There, still looks like when Joseph Smith showed up, right?
So that would have been
1830.
Okay. Yeah.
That's when the Smiths migrated over from Vermont.
Very, very likely. Yeah, and just that burned over district. Do you think? I guess I don't know my New York geography, but is Palmyra part of that burned over district?
It's right there. That's where the Hill Cumorah is. That's where the mound that founded Mormonism is. That's where the angel Moroni, or some sort of lizard creature, if you will, depending on which tale you want to believe, pointed Joseph Smith to them golden plates, similar to them golden plates that offshoot there upon Smith's early demise there in 1844. The Strangites who moved up to Wisconsin found themselves a mound in Wisconsin, a different set of golden plates, new Book of Mormon, new offshoot of Mormonism, right?
Yeah, I got a fun story about that too. I went looking for that, the Hill of Promise, I believe it was called, in Burlington, Wisconsin, which actually, on the way from Madison to Burlington, Wisconsin, you drive right past Bray Road, and it's only 5 miles.
Yes, sir. I've been there. It is real close, right? Real close.
It's so close. So yeah, we talk about the Strangite offshoot. So, this Strang guy, he was kind of an interesting character, also from northern New York. Kind of got chased out of northern New York, got in trouble with some debtors, and ended up in Burlington, Wisconsin. And actually, he traveled south. He went to what was the main place in Illinois?
Nauvoo. So they got thrown out of the Palmyra region. So that they got thrown out of there. They got thrown out of Kirtland, Ohio next. That was where the first temple was. Then they get thrown out of Independence, Missouri. Then and then they start Nauvoo, Illinois, and Joseph Smith gets murked in April of 1844, I believe, when he was telling everybody he's gonna be the president.
Yep. So he was running for president at the time, but Strang, he's up in Wisconsin, and he hears about Joseph Smith, and he actually makes a pilgrimage, which, Burlington to Nauvoo, that's, in a car today, that's nothing. But I think horse and buggy back then, that's days.
Oh, I was gonna say, did he get on the river? Maybe he'd pop on the river.
I'm not sure if he did on that. Burlington is on so that would be the southeast side, where the Mississippi River was the southwest. So, I'm not sure how he got there, but he got there and saw what Joseph Smith was doing there, saw what Hiram Smith was doing, got really interested, and actually became a member of the Mormon Church. And then after, Joseph got clapped, he tried to throw his hat in the ring, saying that he had a letter of, God damn it, I can't even remember, a specific letter that said that he was supposed to be the next leader of the Mormon Church. But of course, politics got involved, and Brigham Young kind of strong-armed his way into leadership. And, this guy that comes on the scene just a few months earlier, he's not going to be able to lead it. But he actually attracted a lot of Mormons to that Wisconsin settlement, and then eventually to Beaver Island up near Mackinac Island in the north of Lake Michigan, near
because he was a politician in Michigan, right?
He was, yes. And he had the backing of the Mormons there in a very, very small area. It was a large geographic territory with sparsely populated, but populated mostly by his Mormons. So he was actually able to, rally the Mormon vote, and also stuff the ballot box to pull that one over and become, the story. If you want to hear the whole story, Unfiltered Rise podcast, me and Heidi sat down and went over the whole thing, and it just blew my mind at how close this guy got to being caught up in the law, but somehow wriggled out of it. But then, met a similar fate to Mr. Joseph Smith in the end, where he was, assassinated by, estranged members of his own clan.
Yeah, well, we see a lot of assassinations and whatnot, even to this modern era amongst the Mormons. A lot of bombings. They love bombings. They love murking folks. They love false flags. They love a lot of shit, don't they?
It's wild, just the squeaky clean image of the Mormon, and then you listen to some of Heidi's tales, and you're like, wow, not everything is as it seems. Much like a lot of the stuff.
Heidi's got some great tales on the Mormon stuff. I always enjoy linking up with her. She'll be on here on Fridays in 2 weeks to talk more Mormon stuff, along with Jacob J, former Exmo as well, like myself and Heidi there from Rise to Liberty.
That's right. You are an Exmo. That's right.
22 years, sir. I survived. I got out alive.
Wow.
I didn't pay them any tithing either. That was an issue for them.
Yeah.
They're all about money, dude. They're all about
run into some problems when you don't pay your dues.
Oh, dude, even for teenagers, dude. They still gave me temple recommends, so I was still able to go practice some necromancy in the temples and whatnot. But the they are serious about that tithing. They're real serious about it. And apparently they're real serious about murder.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Digging into it and just seeing, how they have ties in everything. And as Heidi always says, she doesn't want to she doesn't want to denigrate, your average everyday Mormon, and neither do I, but to not recognize that, the power structures of every single organization that we come into contact, there's usually something a little dirty or nefarious or secrets.
Well, at this point in my life, sir, in Muppet World 2025, I basically made the rule of you run around with a happy, shiny face. There's some dark shit going on. Now, that's not a new rule necessarily. For example, I've long been convinced Tim Tebow, that former, quarterback guy from the NFL and Florida Heisman guy, he wrote a fucking biography at like the age of 21, talking about how he saved the world. I'm like, that dude's got some dark shit in his fucking closet. Look at Mike Pence, former Vice President Mike Pence. I'm not the Vice President, but former Vice President Mike Pence making public statements. He doesn't have meetings with women unless in a room unless his Vice President. I'm like, that dude's got some fucking skeletons in his closet. You know what I
mean? there was a reason for that, huh?
Well, I mean, he's making that statement. He's purveying an image because he wants to portray this image that he's like, wait a second, what are you trying to get ahead of there, bud? What's going on here?
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying another story that I came across in doing the kind of what I do is the story of this ethnologist. His name was Alanson. Another crazy name, Alanson Skinner. So he headed up research of a burial mound site on the Menominee Reservation near Shawano, Wisconsin. This would be in the northeast part of the state. So his work on digging up some of these sites was permitted by his father-in-law, a guy by the name of E.A. Allen, who was a superintendent at that reservation. And the people of that reservation, of course, they were not thrilled with a white man coming in there and poking around at their heritage. So
can't say I blame them.
Yep. So after that survey was concluded, there was another archaeologist, folklorist. He's I would say he's kind of the patron saint of Badgerland Legends. His name's Charles E. Brown. Well, he visited the excavation site. Charles E. Brown, just to back up, him and Increase with Latham, they're probably the two men that are responsible for most of the mounds being preserved today. So I have to thank those guys for being able to get out to the land, document these things, publish them, and also work to preserve them. So because of those two dudes.
What was the guy's name besides Lapham? Who was the other guy you were crediting?
This guy's name is Alanson Skinner, who is the ethnologist, and then the folklorist. His name's Charles E. Brown, Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown. Okay. Yep. Yeah, I'm about to do some occult genealogy of these gentlemen because I imagine I'm going to find the society there. Because
yes, I would love to hear the archaeology that you do on these archaeologists. So, Mr.
Look at Putnam, right? You know the name Putnam, right? Relative to the mounds, right? That's that name rings familiar, right? Squire and Davis, LaPlongeon.
Yep.
These names ring familiar to you from these mounds.
I've heard of
Squire,
the names. Yeah.
Squire and Davis were hired by the Smithsonian in 1840. We'll call it circa 1848. A lot of things happened around that time with mounds. So they are hired. The Smithsonian's formed by Putnam, who's a descendant from the Rhode Island, hereditary member from the Rhode Island chapter, from a General Rufus Putnam. And all those artifacts from those studies are in the Peabody Museum at Harvard. He was their main dude there to get all those artifacts. But he helped start the Smithsonian with Jefferson Davis, whose father was an OG member of the Society of Cincinnati, the other first president. In fact, Jefferson Davis would serve in the Wars of 1812 guarding mounds down in Iowa, what is now known today as the Effigy Mounds National Park there on the Mississippi River.
Right, it's right across from the Wisconsin border. So
he was the captain in charge of that fort, guarding those mounds. So there's evidence of folks even protecting these mounds. But we see there, with all these kind of matters, a lot of mound stuff, but we time after time, though, it is the Society of Cincinnati that goes back to these matters. So when they create the Smithsonian, they hire Squire and Davis, more society folks, a French descendant of the French and possible hereditary member of the French chapter, a fellow by the name of Augustus Laplongeon, whose father was a powerful commander within the French chapter of the Navy there in the Society of Cincinnati's French chapter. And he comes over and he's their assistant on these matters. So everything we start seeing with the study, the creation, everything is all society related.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to see you pop those guys' names in and see what you can do as far as
because I mean we see the name game too. The other thing I see, and you probably recognize a little bit as well, is the name game, like Jefferson County, right?
Yes.
Madison, right?
Yes.
Naming after these Society of Cincinnati members, specifically ones that had a deep interest in the mounds, whether it's Albert Gallatin, the Swiss founding father, George Washington, Marquis de Lafayette, et cetera, Jefferson, Hamilton, et cetera, right?
Here's another name game for you. The place where that Beast of Bray Road sighting is, that specific Bray Road, it is in Lafayette, Wisconsin.
There you go, sir.
Just to kind of tie that
and
together.
That's why it's named that, because of the mound. So, and I actually came across the work of Lauren Coleman over these matters years back.
Yes.
Because Lauren Coleman has documented these name games relative to what he calls the Fayette factor. We came across each other's on these matters of mounds in these name games. He was not tracking the Society of Cincinnati factor, but quickly realized, the Washington and Fayette factors he was tracking goes right into this mix. And it's always mound sites, and it's always weird shit that happens around them. For example, the Mothman, not just the Beast of Bray, or not just the Wisconsin Dogman. We got Mothman sighting. The first two are on mound sites, at least at minimum. We got a Loveland, and here in Cincinnati, the city that George would survey and map, and the mounds of which before it was created. We're talking early 1790s. He's in and around the parts of Cincinnati. He actually surveys a park, one of the 7 hills of Cincinnati, like the ancient Roman city of Rome. They venerate ancient Republic of Rome. This is their new Rome, if you will, and their headquarters, capital, operationally speaking, to this day, I would argue. But so one of those parks, the 7 hills, is Alms Park. They got the Alms Park beaver. They got their own cryptid. There's mounds there. We got the Loveland frog. That's a frog cryptid. We got the New Richmond octopus man sightings of 1953 from New Richmond into the city of Cincinnati, about 8 miles downriver. We have numerous sightings of what was described as a 8-foot octopus man.
Wow. That
sounds a lot of weird cryptids on these mounds,
Lovecraft shit right there.
Right. Well, you were mentioning the Pennyroyal podcast before. Yeah, dude. So I think that's these stories and what these sightings have reported, or whatever folks are experiencing there, because I don't think they're necessarily, I don't have a belief system that are physical objects, right? So, I don't discount folks' experiences or what they're seeing something, right? But again, it's in around mound sites. Fucking gets weird,
it's
but
always
nonetheless,
around mound sites,
right? And and if you want to take the concepts and ideas of the Typhonian offshoot of the Ordo Templi Orientis, they not only have a deep interest in the mounds, they have a deep interest in the mounds from West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, and the Ohio River Valley, down to Pulaski County, there with the Pennyroyal podcast you mentioned. Pulaski is Casimir Pulaski. He was a officer of Polish, Czech Polish ancestry, and he so there's a lot of Pulaskis, and those are all mound places as well. But those Typhonian folks were doing rituals on those mound sites in through Cincinnati down into Somerset, there in Pennyroyal's regions, Pulaski County. That's about 2 hours away, 2 hours south. So they're covering a good distance in the 2 hours in each direction of Cincinnati, but basically east and south, and all the mounds in between. And they're doing rituals allegedly to close portals, as they say. I would argue, I'd like to see some evidence of that. Maybe they're opening portals.
I would argue towards the latter,
stuff, right?
Yes.
That's the branch that's deep into Lovecraft.
Yeah. So I'll put a pin, or I'll wrap up the story of that. So this Allenson Skinner guy, ethnologist, he heads up this excavation on this Indian reservation. Charles Brown sees the work and he's disturbed by the activity there. So not long after that, Skinner's wife, which is also the daughter of the superintendent of that that Indian reservation. She ended up dying suddenly in a Milwaukee hospital shortly after he did this. Well, then shortly after completing the work on that site, Skinner
he just dies,
himself,
huh?
he dies in an automobile accident. So both this guy's daughter and son-in-law die within 2 years. So, that makes kind of ask is like, is there a curse here? Is it a mere coincidence? Is there some kind of force that did him in? I don't know, but don't fuck with the mounds, folks.
Dude, that's a great advice, sir. I say don't fuck with the mounds, and also do not fuck with cursed dolls. Don't go near them. Don't have nothing to do with them. I've seen some stand-up comedian, that Matt Rife.
I'll just say, R.I.P. Matt Rife.
Yeah, exactly. You might as well just do your last will and testament, bud. You just got yourself a fucking fun journey of cursed doll land. I've been there, sir. I still might be there today. For the last 13 years, that damn haunted doll, Robert the Doll, down there in Key West, Florida, sits on a mound site in a Civil War fort. And without warning, I go in there to look at a Civil War site that's built on a mound, and they hit me with a fucking haunted doll. And I'm like, yeah, I'll go check out this haunted doll I've never heard about. And they're like, oh yeah, don't take a picture with it, you'll get cursed. I'm like, yeah, that's fucking stupid. So I took a picture with it, and I don't know if it's that stupid, man. Again, weird shit happens in around these mound sites. You put a fucking haunted doll on it, dude, you're just asking for trouble.
Yeah, stay away from haunted dolls. Stay away from, just treat the mounds with reverence.
Mounds, haunted dolls, and it's like gremlins, dude. You don't want to feed them after midnight. You certainly don't want to get them wet, and you don't want to put a haunted doll on a mound site.
Yeah, and even I talked about my
if I may, sir, without a disclaimer, they could at least give me some warning, like, hey, we got a fucking haunted doll here. They're like, hey, once you're in there, they tell you about the haunted dolls.
You took a picture with it.
Well, that's on me. I understand that. I will take responsibility for that. They did tell me not to do that, but I'm Scott's Irish, so I will not listen to that.
They told you not to because they wanted to collect admission, or they're just concerned for your well-being.
I was looking at some photos recently because I did a show on here recently about Robert the Doll and my cursed nature of such for the last 13, almost, well, no shit. We just hit 13 years a couple weeks ago. Anyway, yeah, dude, it's a bizarre tale. It's a really bizarre tale because when we start looking at these mounds again, again, Civil War site, right? So we see a lot of Civil War forts, Revolutionary forts, War of 1812 stuff with Jefferson Davis, et cetera, et cetera. We see all these things being built on mound sites intentionally.
Yeah, the War of 1812 was the only foreign conflict that happened in Wisconsin that happened in Prairie du Chien, which is right there where Jefferson Davis was hanging out.
Yeah, dude. And so when we see a continuity of activity, from the Society of Cincinnati and other secret societies like the International Order of Oddfellows, for example, and when you're talking about weird activity around the mounds, they love that stuff. And you want to talk about some strange deaths you were talking about with those folks. Well, I've had a lot of that in my family tree, sir, or as I call it, an Appalachian family pole, as it lacks the requisite branches in which to be described as a tree. And I'm utterly shocked I don't have web feet, recessed chin line, and sub 70 IQ. But nonetheless, my grandfather, upon the sudden and untimely death of my grandfolks Vance there in Logan County, West Virginia, who had inherited land from Abner Vance, my forefather there in the Revolution. Again, a lot of these land grants and claims, but Abner was a surveyor. So he had, surveyors always had a little bit more land than the normal folks there in the Revolutionary times with the war and land grants, because they were the ones mapping shit out and doing all the surveying. So anyhow, this land had been there a long time. Is the only flat land in basically the only flat land in Logan County. Logan County kind of sits in a bowl. Logan, West Virginia, it almost looks like an old volcano or something like that. It's a weird environment. Everything around you is a giant rock cliff. There's not a lot of, outside of the main city, there's not a lot of flat land, but a lot of it was in the Clan Vance family there. And my grandfolks met an untimely demise in circa 1926, I think, now that I think about it. My grandfather, Vance there, was 16 years old. However, the International Order of Oddfellows, which my great-grandfather was a part of, changed my grandfather's birth certificate to make him 14 years old, institutionalized him in the Oddfellows orphanage, and then stole all the family's land. Some of that land I do suspect was mound land because Logan itself is built on a mound.
Wow. Yeah, that's some dirty pool right there. Just took his birthright right out from under him.
Yeah, well, him and his younger sisters got institutionalized. He had to fight for himself in court. I mean, I have all the records of the court stuff. He represented himself to argue these things, and I've looked for them land records because obviously my family put my detective skills to the test, and sent me on that mission years ago. And they obviously someone put those in the garbage can immediately. There's no record of these land transactions. They're like, well, we just there's a new owner. We don't have any record of the old owner.
Of course.
So these and we see the Oddfellows building a lot of cemeteries throughout Kentucky, Indiana, and especially Illinois around mounds.
Yeah, there's something about mounds, man. And you were talking about the Typhonian OTO characters. Well, there's a guy out of Chicago. His name's Michael Bertreau. Have you heard that name?
No.
So he is. Somebody told me that Alan Greenfield said that he is the most magical man in America. I'll spell you his name here.
Well, sir, apparently I have heard of this man because as I looked it up, I'd already been on his Wikipedia. So
okay, there you go.
You have to refresh my memory.
So anyway, so there's a place called Devil's Lake. It's right smack dab in the center, the south central of Wisconsin, and of course there are mounds there. It's a stone's throw away from the only anthropomorphic effigy mound, a man mound. So it's
that's an interesting one, right?
Yeah, only a few minutes away from there. And this Bertreau character, he comes up to Sauk County, and I believe it was on the advice of a guy by the name of August Derleth. Does that name ring a bell to you? You might not know August Derleth's name.
Not recognizing my brain hole, sir, but
you will know. You will know.
I'd obviously been here before, but I don't remember why.
So August Derleth is the reason why H.P. Lovecraft is a household name, because he is the one who carried on his legacy of publishing out of Arkham Publishing in Sauk City, Wisconsin. So H.P. Lovecraft was well known for doing a lot of short stories and kind of pulpy stuff, but August Derleth got a hold of his writings and the publishing for them and was able to compile the compendiums of H.P. Lovecraft's work posthumously and publish them. So Mr. Derleth believed that there were these Cthulhu power zones in Wisconsin, mostly along the Wisconsin River, where August Derleth lived, right there in Sauk County, as well as places like Devil's Lake, another place called Frog Lake. And Michael Bertreau, he came up to Wisconsin with a clan of his devotees and did these sex rituals trying to evoke the old ones through Devil's Lake.
That's Cthulhu, right? That's the old ones, right?
So, something like that. I believe Cthulhu may be. I don't know I'm not going to say that I know my entire Cthulhu mythos.
I'm only reciting.
Lovecraft.
Yeah, I don't either, sir.
But,
so fair enough.
But
I'm only reciting
it was definitely through the Lovecraft mythos that he tried to evoke these old ones through. And
my understanding of Cthulhu is solely based on my readings of the lunatic and everyone's favorite psychological warfare operations officer, Green Beret, allegedly, although I would argue that Joey bastard passed no physical fitness test, especially for special forces, Michael Aquino. So he's all about Cthulhu.
Interesting. All right. So yeah, this guy comes up to Wisconsin and tries to evoke the old ones with these magical sex rituals. Whether or not
I was going to ask you, sir, is he an OTO member? I think you already answered my question, because again, we're seeing another example here then of the OTO, specifically the Typhonian varieties around these mound sites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So definitely an interest in the specific mound sites, those Cthulhu power zones, whatever they are. I'm not quite certain, but Derleth talked about them. I'll drop the Cult of Weird did a great chat. I just dropped it in the chat there for you to see.
Oh, his mother's a Volk, huh?
Oh,
August
you're on
Derleth.
Derleth. Okay.
His mother's Rose Louise Volk. They're a notable family in Wisconsin.
I know there's a Volk field, which you
Yes,
might
sir.
be
That's the
familiar
name.
with. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at one point in my service there in the Air Force, I managed programs for the Air Force military police at various headquarters assignments, one of which at one point in time included the Air National Guard headquarters there in Washington, D.C. So it was one of my Air National Guard bases. I was, responsible for the manpower, equipment, money stuff for their cops. And so I'm, very, not very familiar. I just know that is a name based upon a military heritage there within the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't dug deep into that specific name, but this Berteau character, he's a OTOA, Ordo Templi Orientis Antiqua.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that one. You're gonna have to help me out there.
This is my first time hearing it. I'm just looking at his Wikipedia page.
Well, once again, then we see again these. I don't know why I got to this guy before, but I'd already been on this page. But maybe I read I think I read this Voodoo Gnostic workbook. Let me tell you what.
Okay, that might be it. Yeah.
Let me tell you what, sir. I feel a lot dumber as a result of reading that. Now I think about it here. I try to discard things that I find to be completely ridiculous, and I obviously discarded that one. But thanks to my interwebs history, it informed me that I've been here before.
All right.
So this Devil's Mound or Devil's Lake situation,
Devil's Lake,
why are we naming it Devil's Lake? Why are the OTO these proto-Satanists? However, if you listen and look at the words of folks like Michael Aquino, all the Wiccan folks like Frost and Gardner, and I'm missing one right now. Anyhow, there's the Wiccan founders. They all salute Aleister Crowley there, is the founder of the OTO there and whatnot. For his being more Satanism or more Satanist than Anton LaVey could ever be.
Interesting.
Buckland. There we go. I knew I'd find it in my brain hole. Buckland, Gardner, and Frost all salute these matters. So we were talking earlier also with these name games and whatnot, and the activity around these mounds. I didn't know about these Thelema fellows up there, so that's interesting. And it's not a shocker because we see that same pattern of Typhonian activity in the Ohio Valley Adena mound sites. But I did come across a survey, and I do find these things somewhat ridiculous, these surveys. But for example, there's a survey of vampires that was done about 20 years ago, saying that the second most highest population center of vampires in America outside of New Orleans, folks that recognize themselves as vampires. It was a study conducted by the Vampire Research Center in Atlanta or some nonsense. They published it. I read it. But they claim Dayton, Ohio, which again is a heavy mound site. I mean, there's a lot of them still exist today in that region. I live not far from there today, but we that survey of the Satanic, and they called it Satanic and Witches Covens, which again, if you look at the statements of the folks that founded these organizations, they do confirm there is no difference. And like I said, Buckland, Gardner, Frost, Keno, LeVay, they're all in agreement. And on a lot of these matters, and they all salute each other in regards to Satanism shit, right? That's what they call it, because that's not what Crowley called it. But these things are older, and again, these old ones thereafter, Cthulhu is something that Aquino is very focused on in all of his writings and admitted so in his rituals. So we see the continuity of activity there, but we also see in that survey of Wisconsin, these witches and satanic covens, apparently y'all have the highest per capita concentration, not just those effigy mounds, but also these covens.
Yeah. I wish I could speak more intelligently to that. It's not something I've really dug deep into. I know there was a specific... You don't
see any ladies with broomsticks flying around the streets or nothing up there?
Only on the weekends.
Devil horn fellows running down the road?
Yeah. I know there's a place called Circle Sanctuary, and I think Stephen Recluse has done some scholarship on that specific site. And I know when Stephen was in Wisconsin a few visits back, he found something he found a document in our historical society here in Madison, Wisconsin Historical Society, about Betty Aquino, but I don't remember the specifics. So that'd probably be a great follow-up topic for Mr. Reckless.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he mentioned that before. I discarded that in my brain hole somehow, but yeah, it'd be interesting because she's an interesting character. I was just covering her recently on my my Thursday show, Operation GCD Thursdays, the Anatomy of Satanic Panic. I was doing a 6 Degrees, was helping actor Kevin Bacon out. He requested a new Patsy for a 6 Degrees game. So my Operation GCD Make-A-Wish attempt to help out actor Kevin Bacon. We did a 6 Degrees of Mikey Aquino, trying to understand, where he came from, what is, the environment he grew up in and existed in, and so on and so forth. And actually, sir, on that note, you were mentioning earlier your coverage of some serial killers local to Wisconsin and whatnot. And on that note, regarding these 6 Degrees kind of matters, and like I was saying, where Mikey Aquino comes from. One of my favorite games here in Operation GCD Fridays is who is your daddy and what does he do? Now, I'm not asking you, sir, but I'm saying I have a contestant each week here, and I want you to review these matters and let me know your thoughts of this game of who is your daddy and what does he do?
You tell me, who is your daddy and what does he do?
What do you think about that one? That was Ted Bundy and Bill Colby. I'll bring up the photo here for a closer study. Speaking of serial killers, Ted Bundy, we don't know who his father is. There's not a lot of great information. I can put a circumstantial argument together. It may, in fact, be Bill Colby, the CIA director who allegedly brought the Phoenix program come home.
Okay. I've never heard that before, but that's interesting. I thought you were going to ask me about like Jeffrey Dahmer's dad, since you're on topic of Wisconsin.
Well, that was actually, are you in my brain hole, sir? Because that was my follow-up question once we got past that. That was my introduction to get into Dahmer.
Okay. All right. I spoiled it for you. I'm sorry, JJ.
No, you're good, man. But I like your style, sir. If Bill Colby is, in fact, the CIA director who brought the Phoenix program of Michael Aquino and gang there, because what Aquino was doing over there was weaponizing the religion and folklore of the local societies in Southeast Asia against them in psychological operations. Well, if you apply that to what he did here in America with Satan, my back?
Yep, you're back. Yeah, I was going to say you froze up. I wasn't sure if it was me or you.
Are you familiar with Program to Kill?
Remind me what that is. Program to Kill.
Am I back?
Yep, I can hear you. Program to Kill. Remind me.
Dave McGowan, he wrote a book about all these serial killers, and his thesis was that there was these Phoenix program come home.
Okay.
And Bill Colby's the man he credited for doing that as the CIA director when he got appointed there in the early 70s. So, and he ran the Phoenix program over there in Viet fucking Nam. They were the Keno and gang and all these assassins. And I think it's a good thesis. And on that note, wouldn't it be wild if the fellow that brought the Phoenix program home was the biological father of one of those fucking serial killers, Ted Bundy?
That would be wild. Also a Mormon.
There you go, sir. He converted. But it is an odd conversion, right? So, and again, I think there's something to be said about that. Let me find my Ted Bundy, Bill Colby pick. So I've gone deep into these matters as a result, looking at old Bill Colby. I call them, this particular picture I call Bill and Ted's Murderous Adventure. So Colby, in fact, strangely enough, as I look deeper into his history, you were mentioning Burlington, Wisconsin there, right? It's a very strange place, right?
Very.
And the namesake of which is for Burlington, Vermont. Am I correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, because it's that New England,
we have a lot of those
war land grants, right?
Yep, we have a lot of those cities that are named after places. I think we have a Palmyra, Wisconsin as well. Going back to that.
Right, and that's why we see these matters, because of those land grants from these folks who fought in the Revolution, and these, some of the enlisted guys got land grants, obviously, but the officers got larger land grants, and we see them; they're the ones making the names, right? So, in regards to that, we see those namesakes, right? And again, we see Burlington, Vermont's an interesting place. So that's kind of my bootleg home, away from home, if you will. I was born in Danbury, Connecticut, hail from Ridgefield, just across the border from Westchester County, New York. That place is a real den of iniquity if you're familiar with the Son of Sam Tales and the Process Church.
Mm-hmm.
The Burlington. My grandfather went to high school. This is where he's from. Burlington, Vermont, right down there on Church Street. The end of Church Street, right behind the church where he grew up. Church Street's a real fucking apocalypse. Now it's this nice, it's a cobblestone road. Used to be filled with commerce and live music, kind of like a New Orleans kind of vibe almost. It's where the band Fish would, the whole culture that produced the band Fish. And today it produces stabbings and a lot of needles on the ground and a lot of shuttered businesses. But Bill Colby years ago went to high school with my grandfather there. They both graduated together. Found that fun fact out recently looking into Colby's history. But Ted Bundy is born to an unmarried mother in the Unmarried Mothers Hospital in Burlington, Vermont in November of 1940. Make sure I'm not making up numbers. 1946. Yeah, November of 46. Colby's parents, the reason why he's from Minnesota. The reason why he's in Vermont is because his father, he was a military brat. His father was an Army colonel who retired, took the job as the ROTC commander at the University of Vermont in 1941. 1940, late 40 or early, I think it was the 40-41 school year there. Anyhow, Bill came back from the war there after his Project Paperclip duties on assignment up in Norway. Which that's interesting, on this OSS business, they were importing all them Nazis and
space program.
Well, not only that, sir, they were involved in this. He was specifically Colby was involved in these stay behind networks and setting up all these guerrilla warfare activities, and that's precisely what these ideas of the serial killers come home with the Phoenix program is. Bill Colby brought all of his programs home. Phoenix program. The serial killers, that is, the satanic serial killers, Air America, the drug trafficking we see through like Arkansas, Freeway Rick Ross, the crack epidemic, and so on and so forth, and probably still to this day. And also the Operation Gladio, these stay behind guerrilla warfare tactics. I think those things have all been mashed together here in America. They're all Bill Colby's programs, but we see Colby come back in his early onset there in that career in OSS, and he enrolls in Columbia University. And I presume while he's in New York City at law school, that he's routinely visiting his folks in Burlington, Vermont over the next couple of years because they're there until 48. I'm sorry, disregard. Yeah, 49. His father got a new job in 49 at a different school. Anyhow, so if that's the case, well, then isn't it weird that Bill Colby and Ted Bundy look suspiciously alike? And this would also explain Ted Bundy's inexplicable rise to Republican politics, specifically the Nelson Rockefeller campaign of 1968, and also as the bodyguard driver for the gubernatorial candidate in 1972 there in Washington State, I believe it might have been 1970, and also his venture into law school, just like his dad, Bill Colby.
Wow. Those are some wild threads.
Yeah, because we don't know who his dad is. So he's born in Unwed Mother's Hospital there in Burlington, and it is not known. He was adopted, obviously, and whatnot, but it's not known who his biological father is. And I'm just saying,
grandfather?
Wouldn't it be weird, right? Wouldn't it be weird?
You said your grandfather graduated with him. Could be your granddad?
I also... What's that, sir?
It could be your uncle.
I hope not. On that note, I think I think my grandfather was also there in the OSS. He was Office of Naval Intelligence, and at the same time, old Bill there is high school. He never told me he knew, and we were pretty close. He never told me he knew Bill Colby or nothing, but he never really talked about much like that. He did teach me the woods and streams and fishing and whatnot in Vermont, so I do credit him and thank the man for that. And those are the matters we discussed. He never talked about his career, but he was a Mr. Fix-It, black projects, top secret projects, scientist for 37 years after the war. But during the war, he was a O&I fella, radio guy on an interesting little radio craft up in the Arctic Circle at the same time Bill's up there in Norway, just south of there. So all I'm saying is somebody ran the radio communications for that operation of those Project Paperclip, especially that early, the first draft. The Operation Overcast, the first draft, the Werner von Braun's, the Walter Dornbergers, et cetera, right? The space program, right? Yep. So all those guys came on the first draft, and that's what that's what Colby was part of. And I think my grandfather, his high school classmate, was involved in it too, to be honest with you. But yeah, these matters of Nazi stuff seem to perpetrate a lot of parapolitics. But yeah, Bill Colby is certainly the epicenter of all that activity from day one. in these matters of a serial killers and terrorizing your society. That's pretty Nazi sounding to me, sir.
It does, yeah. And how do we tie this into Mr. Dahmer?
This I call RR channel. I appreciate your dedication and motivations, RR. It keeps me motivated. This is the CIA AI ball washer of Bill Colby. Every time I mention the name, he pops up like some sort of weird devil creature. Well, I mean, so if Dahmer's part of the same program, right? If we think of this Phoenix program, Come Home, serial killers, right? McGowan theorizes, and there's a lot of evidence of, and I've been covering a lot of that on my Thursday show, documenting a lot of these matters and whatnot. Continuing that, building upon that theory of McGowan's, and so Dahmer's kind of Gen 2 of that operation.
Yeah, he spent some time in Germany while he was in the army, and it's not clear what he was doing over there.
Not only is it not clear, before he went to that army, McGowan cites in his book, sir, that when Jeffrey Dahmer was 17 years of age, he's on a high school field trip in 1977 to Washington, D.C. Might have been 1976.
That's right.
And calls Walter Mondale personally from a payphone and says, "Hey, Walt, my high school classmates and I would like a personal tour of the White House. Can you help us out?" And he says, "You know what? You're a nice fellow there, Jeff. Come on down."
Just some kid from Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
Calling up the vice president.
Totally normal.
Totally
normal.
Nothing suspect about that at all.
Yeah, and his hunting ground there in Milwaukee he would cross paths with folks like John Wayne Gacy. He would get one of his victims from one of the same gay nightclubs in Milwaukee that Dahmer did. And Dahmer, according to the account of a fellow from the Son of Sam process cult there in New York, John Paul Ranieri, he claims to have raped Jeffrey Dahmer back in Milwaukee there in the that time period. I believe it was the late 70s, early 80s there. So, Dahmer's a weird character, but yeah, how does he get a personal how's he know Walter Mondale? You know what I mean? Before he goes in the army and gets involved, like you said, with whatever he gets involved in, we don't know, but how's he know Walter Mondale?
That sounds like some Franklin scandal shit.
Right, dude, he's probably groomed and shit, right? That's what I was thinking. So I think that is part of a program. So he's kind of a Gen 2 of that. And we see a lot of the same patterns, the army stuff, like you're saying, et cetera, the weird political, parapolitical connections, if you will, and whatnot, the connecting principles between other serial killers across time and geography and time, right? New York, Chicago, different time periods, slightly crossed over time periods, but nonetheless, would you believe when Netflix did a documentary on Ted Bundy, they filmed it in Claremont County, Ohio, at a jail, Claremont County Jail, starring Zac Efron, which is built on a mound site.
Not surprised at all.
Why are they filming the movies on mound sites too, right? What's going on here, man?
Crazy. The one thing about Ohio, definitely has the mounds there. The one place I've always been fascinated with is the Ohio State Reformatory. Is that a mound site?
Yeah. Yes, sir. And it's also, we're going to circle back to where we started here earlier. It's also a Stephen King story built on a mound site, right? Yep.
Well, that's where
that's Shawshank, right?
Shawshank is where they filmed Shawshank. Yeah.
Well, that's the place where King apparently built the story upon it, of my understanding. And again, that is a Stephen King book. I think he may have written on one of his other pseudonyms. He's got a couple of those, but nonetheless, we see again, fiction is telling us these, massive tales that mold a lot of ideas in our current culture and society, and they all revolve around building shut up mound sites and weird shit happening.
Yeah. So back to Wisconsin, as far as the Mendota Mental Health Institute, right there on the mound site, one of the best preserved complete mound sites. If you can find a picture of it from the aerial, it features the largest bird effigy mound in the world. They call it the Eagle Mound, and it's flanked by two other smaller bird effigies. But the curious thing about that is that there is also what's called a water panther effigy there. So there are the birds of the sky. There are the regular woodland creatures like deer. I think there's a bear, there's a turtle. So those regular of the standard plane of existence, whatever you want to call it, the base plane of existence.
Right.
Yep.
The normal animals and characters, right?
And then also that water panther, which would represent the underwater realm or the underworld. So having that all in that depicted in that one mound site with the cosmology. No worries. The entire cosmology.
Water panther, though, what is that? What's a water panther? Because my understanding, this is part of their mythology of the god that lived in these waters that they would pay tribute to and build the mound sites at the confluence of rivers of, right?
Yeah. Basically a feline creature like a panther of the land that lived underwater, was mischievous, toppled canoes, dragged the Indians to their watery depths. Some say they held them captive and alive. I'm not sure how that checks out, but there's not a lot that I understand about their actual cosmology, other than that being reflected both in their folklore, and also right off of that site is a place called Governor's Island, and the specific legends of that water panther come right off of that Governor's Island, and then having that also erected in a mound effigy right near there it cannot be coincidental. So it's just kind of a reflection of all three planes of that existence, along with the actual folklore happening right there, a stone's throw off of that little bay, is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So, I mean, you're describing a lot of great history here in Wisconsin, and I imagine, much like it is around here, this is not well known amongst the locals.
No, hardly anybody knows these are here, which is, there's a lot of small plaques and everything, but I don't think people understand, the context or the actual, the abundance of them in the area.
Oh, for sure, dude. So there used to be over 100,000 Adena mounds in Ohio, allegedly, and there is indications of that with older maps and whatnot of, much larger volume than exists today. But even that, like you were saying earlier, folks stumble across mounds every day around here in constructions. In Newtown, Ohio, it's just immediately outside of the city of Cincinnati on the east side. In the Hamilton County, still like Alexander Hamilton, the second president general of the society, Cincinnati. Is a town of Newtown, and that they have an International Order of Oddfellows cemetery, sir, that they built around a Adena mound site. And I spoke to the University of Cincinnati archaeologist, which University of Cincinnati is built on a mound, mounds. But I spoke to him years ago. He claims that Newtown was inhabited 19,000 years ago by folks, and they can't build a building in that town without finding, some ancient shit.
No surprise for me.
And I do salute those folks there, because in finding all this ancient shit, what they did was they turned their town hall into a museum. So I have appreciated that. I can respect that matter, so I can go look at that shit.
That's awesome. Yeah. Whenever they can preserve any of this stuff, what they make of it from the official record, that's one thing, but to actually have it preserved is pretty cool.
Oh, for sure. So speaking of things found in mounds, and besides these golden plates, which we'll get back to with the Strangites, because if I'm not mistaken, there's more evidence. There was something there besides Joseph Smith's tale of evidence, right? I mean, whether or not there was or not, that's a different story. But I'm just saying they come up with a better tale, at least, of some evidence of these plates.
So in the Strangite sense, they found what are called the copper plates, and most people think they were simply made out of a copper kettle that Strang had kind of forged, and he was the only one that was able to interpret or decipher, and he had his own what's the name, the seer stones, the
Urim and Thummim, sir.
Thummim.
Yeah, yep. I'm a Mormon seminary graduate, so I definitely recall all of these things they baked into my brain hole back then. Yeah.
So
I used to have to go to seminary school before high school. You want to talk about a shitty situation? Get up at 5 in the morning, go learn Mormon theology, dude. Not my style, but that is what I did.
Now, was Mr. Strang, King Strang's name ever uttered?
Oh, God, no. God, no. But you can go inside the building and you find a nice, happy picture of Joseph Smith right there in the entrance. Jesus is kind of a secondary character.
I was going to say, is it the apotheosis of?
It essentially is. I always describe these things, and I'm sure I've discussed it in numerous times with Heidi in these matters, but Heidi Love, the Unfiltered Rise, you were mentioned before. We do a lot of Mormon discussions, and I do respect her opinions on such matters, but I don't know if she agrees with me on this, but it was always my impression that, when you walk in the building and there's Joseph Smith right there, I mean, they got a Jesus picture down the hall, but nonetheless, it's right there. So it makes you think, like, this is the most important character in the matters, and I would argue that's the case,
Absolutely.
So we see his golden place. Not a lot of evidence, right? A lot of people signing some suspicious affidavits, right?
For the most part,
Strang found his copper plates, and he tried to document it, didn't he?
He did document them. He actually had the inventor of the typewriter and the QWERTY keyboard. He was a journalist or a newspaper publisher in nearby, I believe, Kenosha. Come over and view the plates, and he said that I'm not the expert to interpret this matter, but it seems like Mr. Strang is very sincere as far as the matter of finding these copper plates, and they were able to. Yep, they're there. The Voorhees record. If you want to click on that,
yeah,
you can actually see them.
It's an interesting tale, man. It's an interesting tale. You're doing a great job, sir. I appreciate your telling of it here.
Yeah, so he says he found this. This is kind of a sketch of what he found. Kind of looked like Hebrew letters, but not quite, or Hebrew characters, but not quite. And of course,
interestingly enough, though, if I may, sir, interesting enough, we have seen more evidence, and I get a lot of feedback over the years. That's some Mormon shit. You're doing Mormon shit. There has been evidence of this these proto-Egyptian writing that Joseph Smith claimed, and evidence is, similar writings we see here amongst them. And Heidi's talked about this as well, amongst the Micmac tribe, which was a tribe of natives up there in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and they intermarried with the Knights Templars.
Yeah, that kind of ties into the Curse of Oak Island.
Absolutely. And we see Joseph Smith's a descendant from those matters. I don't know about Stranger. I'll have to get back to you on that one. But Joseph Smith's grandfather was a captain in the Massachusetts chapter of the Society of Cincinnati. And his father, Smith, planned the Boston Tea Party. So this is a powerful group.
Yeah, and I know Heidi always says they try to make him out to be some humble, illiterate farmer. But then he's like, well, he's also learning Hebrew. And she was able to trace him through Smith's uncle to kind of corroborate his actual heritage and actual fathers and lineage. So that's
for sure. No, she's done a great job with that. And I think that one concept I think folks possibly might misunderstand today is that's how folks learned, right? So within a family, these matters were passed down, and you were learned within your family. So he learned all the magic shit there too. So that's what I'm saying. Like, they were a very learned bunch.
Yeah, the Solomonic.
Well, that same great-grandfather of Joseph's that helped plan the Boston Tea Party, his father was an accuser in the Salem witch trials.
It's an American tale right there.
Do you know who was an accused witch in the Salem witch trials?
Tituba?
Oh, well, that one. I was being more of a hyperbolic kind of being facetious, but that was a good answer.
I remember the Crucible.
Yeah, you are correct, sir. That's a good answer. What is not known about her is she was not, and I repeat, I'm not the vice president, and Tituba was not a Caribbean lady. She was of these mound cultures and natives. So Peter Levenda documents that in his Sinister Forces. He is an OTOsman of the Typhonian order, but I will say that I don't throw the baby out with the bathtub, even if it is a Satanist baby. Yeah. I don't know if you knew that Peter Levenda was an OTOsman.
I knew that he had a questionable background. I did not know that he was OTO or Typhonian.
Well, but by questionable, do you mean he went to high school, was in the same friend group with, and a year ahead of David Berkowitz?
Ooh, another Son of Sam tie-in, huh?
Yep. And on top of that, I think that Levenda's buddy that he was running around being a fake priest with, that he got just coincidentally got involved with all those wandering bishops from the JFK assassination situation there in New York City. His buddy Andrew Pratsky a fellow by Eastern Orthodox Christian religions like Michael Carr, the Carr brothers and the son of Sam. I think Peter Levenda's dark secret is he knows exactly how David Berkowitz met Michael Carr, and that is through his buddy Andrew Pratsky. Because again, Pratsky and Levenda were a year ahead of Berkowitz, and Levenda will admit that he knew Berkowitz and they had the same friends, but he won't go any further than that. What I'm saying is no one really knows how Carr and Berkowitz met. There's a lot of inferences and some claims, but I think Levenda knows.
Levenda was the tie-in. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Purely speculation. We don't.
Yeah, strongly speculation. Yeah,
allegedly. We don't want to get. We don't want to get fined by a Levenda.
Well, that's for sure. I don't. This is pure supposition. Again, based upon his own statements, I'm simply just filling in the blanks.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But we do see again that Typhonian order, man. He's into it. So in the Sinister Forces, he describes his journeys into the Ohio River Valley, looking at Charles Manson stuff, etc., going to these mound sites. What he doesn't describe is he does later that he knows some of these magicians of the Typhonian order, known as the Bait Cabal, out of Cincinnati, that are doing these mound rituals of and writing about it in their Cincinnati Journal of Ceremonial Magic. And this goes back to the early 70s, and that's when Levenda's, going down there and driving down there throughout the 70s and the 80s and whatnot. And that's when these things are happening. And it's what he says, and he just doesn't fill in the blanks. So what he's not telling you is he's part of that group. You know what I mean? The reason he's telling you about those mounds, he just doesn't say, "Oh yeah, these are I'm part of that Typhonian order," right?
He's doing some gonzo journalism, right?
Yeah, dude, but he's doing some weird magic shit, right? I'm just
that's part of the gonzo journalism.
Okay,
is partaking, right?
That's true. Yeah. That's a good point. I'm trying to find my Levenda OTO picture just so I'm not just making shit up. I mean, I know I'm not making shit up. I'm just saying so I can emphasize my point here. For the dude ceremony, dude, on Investigation Discovery TV, dude. Real world. That happened.
You cut out. What'd you say before the?
Oh, I said, I'm trying to find a picture because you don't got to take my word for it. But Levenda did a OTO ritual on a discovery ritual. On TV, dude. On TV.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. He wasn't too shy about it back in circa 2008. Again, he dances around the subjects. He also claims not to be a former spook, although he's part of that retired spook agency. That little fucking retired. They call themselves a retired organization of intelligence officers or something like that.
So, Levenda, where did he come of age? In the Hudson Valley or Lancaster County, or where did he?
He's from he's from Brooklyn. He went to
Brooklyn, okay.
He went to school with David Berkowitz. He grew up with David Berkowitz.
Okay, all right.
He's known David. He knew David Berkowitz. That he lived in Co-op City, their little, the complex of their apartments. Mm-hmm. He was right up in that whole mix. And again, he admits part of it, but that's what I'm saying. Like he knows a lot. If you start looking at it, he knows a lot more of that situation.
He infers it, yeah. I just didn't know where Berkowitz, if he actually grew up in Brooklyn or if it was
on the outskirts. Well, that's a good question because I think I'm misquoting it. So co-ops, I think it might actually be the Bronx. Now that I think about it,
one of the boroughs.
Yeah, it's the Bronx. So Co-op City it was a housing project, so they both moved to when they were teenagers. Are you familiar with the Son of Sam tale in the process and the Den of Iniquity known as Westchester County?
Marginally, not something that I've looked into too deep. Just obviously the pop culture lore around it.
Sure. So yeah, again, one of those characters from that scene, it says that he's a gay fella. He went to high school with John Carr, the older brother Michael Carr. He escaped the cult, as he claims at least, and went to Milwaukee. And that's brother John Paul Ranieri, as he calls himself. He was a street preacher, gay fella. He's the guy that apparently was at the scene of the first gay riot there at the Stonewall Bar or whatever there in New York City. The big, it's a big movement amongst the LGBTQers. Or as I call them, the Q, all of the above, like a multiple choice test, A, B, C, D, all of the above, Q, all of the above. But John Paul Ranieri there claims that he hooked up with Jeffrey Dahmer and raped him. That's his story. He's one of the main sources. He's a primary source in.
So he's getting it from Gacy and Ranieri.
Well, then you have the Dahmer Gacy situation where one of my favorite folks of the interwebs to provide me some. He's always got some great details on the occult. One of my favorite folks to ask for the occult, the White Witch Doctor of the Ozarks, Laz. He was the first one to bring that to my attention. That two of the victims, there's a crossover with the victimology with those folks. And one thing I like to focus on here at Operation GCD when I'm serial killers, any of these matters, is understanding the victimology. It's often not looked at. And Laz pointed out to me that one of Dahmer's victims and one of Gacy's victims were both hunted and picked from the same gay nightclub in Milwaukee. So we see weird crossover connections there. And then Gacy's employing one of his recruiters in his little network there, recruiting boys, was a recruiter from a Houston network, and the child pornographer from that Houston network was also connected to Gacy. So that there's this weird crossover, and that when I say Houston network, much like Gacy, John David Norman and his pal down there, whose name I can't think of, in Houston in the early 70s, because Gacy was later, obviously. He had about, I think, 29 children, young boys underneath his crawl space like Gacy did. I think Gacy had 33, but nonetheless, we see the connections of folks. Geographically speaking, we see connections there as well, wide spans over time as well. So these are the matters that concern me regarding these kind of things. But with Dahmer, yeah, I mean, he really terrorized Wisconsin. I mean, he was had a big impact.
Yeah. One other kind of tie, I think it may be, more folklore or urban legend than anything, but apparently that very same day that John Wayne Gacy was put to death was the same day that Jeffrey Dahmer had his baptismal rites.
Now, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure, but that's, according to the lore, that happened on the same day. Just kind of another thing that ties the two guys together.
I'll be interested to look into that further, sir, because that is fascinating. So on the
I think that was actually featured in the Ryan Murphy series Monsters on Netflix that came out. I think that they showed Gacy being executed. I believe that's where I saw it, but I'll have to verify that.
Gacy, I'll have to check those out. I'm familiar with those interviews. Gacy's opinions and perspectives are hilarious. He said he should only be convicted of maintaining an unlicensed graveyard. He can go fuck himself. But how does a convicted kid diddler get so close to the first lady?
Oh my!
Right.
I mean, he was
that pen he's wearing.
Okay. Yep.
That pen there he's wearing indicates that the Secret Service cleared him through some measures of background before this event. This was a JC's event. He was the JC of the year or some shit, and by his own admission, he did so by recruiting men through showing them pornographies, which was illegal at the time, still banned. So he had, as he called them, he had whatever an old name for pornos were then. Skin flicks or some nonsense. Anyhow, that's how he was recruiting folks in the JCs. He gets awarded JC of the year, and he is there at the dinner, and that's where he's photographed here. But how does the Secret Service look at this man and I'm familiar with Secret Service operations, sir. I've done a lot of them as an Air Force cop. We do a lot of augmentees of the Secret Service, and I've done every capacity of their operations outside of being the guy there around the president, the immediate personal bodyguards. That is the Secret Service. I'm saying I've augmented every other capacity of their operations, from checkpoints to searches to sniper positions, etc. And I'm going to assure you, there's a large scale effort in security operations and vetting folks, etc. And again, you can identify them. They put pens on them and shit at various levels and places they can go to in events. Just saying, this is public knowledge. Those kind of security matters, and that's why we know that this man went through some vetting there with that pen. And how the fuck do you vet a child that he was a convicted kid diddler at the time? I don't care if he won the JC award.
This was after his conviction.
No, so he got convicted for all the murdering the young boys, but he was convicted of kid diddling years before that.
Well, I knew that, but then this picture was taken after.
This was this was during the Carter administration. I believe this was 1977.
Okay. And I know he was like a small time politician in one of the Chicago suburbs too. And I'm not sure if that ended his political career when he got hauled in for that. But yeah, it's very sketchy. I've never seen this photo before, but yeah, something's up with that.
Right, dude. I mean, like, how do you get so close to the first lady, dude? And not to mention how you get appointed JC of the year makes you really question that organization.
How do you get Walter Mondale on the phone when you're a kid
How do you
from
get
Columbus,
yeah.
Ohio?
Yeah. How do you pick up one of your victims from the same club, right? And that club is the other serial killer out of that club, or as I like to describe them as Colby's queers, not necessarily commentary on their sexual preferences, although look at it, what we're talking about here, but the queer nature of the strange and anomalous effect they've had on our society. Because again, if we know now, one of the known knowns, if you will, we now know a lot of these factors, they connect, right? But we didn't know then. As far as American society goes, we have the ability to look back now in the information age to understand these things, but these fuckers all know each other.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Right. And again, that's a different context, right? It's a different, if Dahmer and him know each other, and then Dahmer's calling Walter Mondale, and this dude's getting next to the president at the same time. This is the Carter administration. So Mondale was his VP, right? So this is Mrs. Carter.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Wow.
It's a weird epicenter. And then again, we got Ted Bundy, right? He's the bodyguard and assistant to gubernatorial candidate, a very prominent one as far as the Bush team goes. He was an appointee of every Republican administration after he lost the gubernatorial race there in Washington State in 1970. He was appointed by Nixon, Ford, Reagan, Bush, and he was the first black candidate in Washington politics, apparently, and he was Republican, and his sidekick was Ted Bundy. And Ted Bundy got that position because he was a all-star in the Nelson Rockefeller 1968 presidential campaign. Bundy made to the top of the ranks of that campaign there in Washington State. Again, I argue, how the fuck does these things happen? Again, we see the guy he's working for, that gubernatorial candidate, linked up with the same Bush network, right? So I ask, again, that'd be the same kind of Colby's Queers network right there, because Bush is the one who replaces him as CIA director after they try to kill Gerald Ford with 2 Manson girls in 1975. So after Ford gets 2 assassination attempts in September of 75 in California by 2 different Manson girls, strange, Squeaky Fromm and Charles Manson's childhood friend from Charleston, West Virginia, strangely enough. How the fuck? No one's ever effectively explained how that situation went down. She's out of prison today, by the way. Not Squeaky, the other one. Anyhow, Ford fired everybody. He fired Colby. He fired the whole staff. He was over it. So, and that's where we get George Bush.
Well, yeah, they kind of shoehorned George Bush after Reagan won the nomination.
Right. But, I think it was pretty evident, I suspect. There's probably a lot of things we said about Gerald Ford, but one thing that could be said is he wasn't happy about them trying to murk him. And I don't think it was lost on him. It was Nelson Rockefeller who was responsible for these matters. Because Nelson Rockefeller, had it been successful, would have been president. And strangely enough, Nelson Rockefeller has some weird connections to the Manson family.
Oh. What are the connections? Curious.
Well, I'm glad you asked, sir, because one of my other favorite characters here on Operation GCD is a legendary, infamous Hollywood film director. You may know him. You may be aware of him. By the name of Cocaine Bob Evans. His name, I didn't give it to him. He asked to be called that. He said he would forever be known as Cocaine Bob Evans. I said, yes, sir. I will respect your wishes in death and continue to call you that. I also do not like to get him confused with one of my favorite breakfast spots.
What was you saying?
That is the Sausage King of Ohio, Bob Evans. But Cocaine Bob Evans here, the man behind a lot of things, but he's the man that introduces Sharon. He brokers the marriage between Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. He is very much in that whole process movement there. And
so is he? I'm not familiar with him. Is he an exec at Paramount, or is he a filmmaker, or how is he tied into the Hollywood?
So a secret Nazi fellow from my hometown there, where I hail from, Ridgefield, Connecticut, lived a couple miles down the road. Charles Bluedhorn. He was still alive back then, because I briefly lived there upon, my early childhood there, about a year or so, year and a half. But he dies in this weird epidemic of a lot of these folks dying around the same circle here, around the process in New York and all this other matters in 1984. But he was a billionaire dude who has a very dubious Nazi background, if you will. But he bought Paramount Pictures in 1966 and hired Cocaine Bob here to run it.
Okay.
It was under Gulf and Western Enterprises. They would later do a lot of weird real estate and banking deals with the Vatican. This is the kind of shit I'm talking about. But Cocaine Bob here, his best friend besides Stan Lee here, he's a sex cultist. It's no surprise that they'd be related to each other there. Was none other than Henry Kissinger. He was the national security state underling of Nelson Rockefeller.
Good old Heinz. Rest in peace.
Yeah. I would say I hope he burns in hell, but I think he'd enjoy that. So I hope he's doing well in heaven. Both of them.
He probably can't stand heaven.
Right. So they're both Ukrainian Jewish origins, both these men. So I suspect that's in part I don't know if they're related. That could be, I have yet to figure that one out, but they are both of Ukrainian Jewish origins. Bob Evans is obviously a stage name. And it's interesting because no one could ever explain why these two were so close. And Lord of mercy, I don't want to know what happened before or after this photograph here, but the tabloids could never explain why the Secretary of State, the guy who's opening up trade with China, amongst other things, is pounding around with Cocaine Bob here.
And, it's curious. They do bear a certain resemblance.
Yeah, I thought so too, sir. I thought so too. And again,
I'm
not good at my genealogy with Europeans and all that. I'm not a speed on that stuff yet. I can tell you that when they came to America, that Bob's family here, old Cocaine Bob there, they moved to Westchester County, New York, real den of iniquity. In fact, they maintain a large-scale grocery business, distribution business there today.
So yeah, Robert J. Shapira is his original name.
Yeah, and I looked at that too, and I think that even might be a accepted name in the new land, if you will.
Sure, yeah, I'm sure it was. Yep. It was something more Eastern European before that.
Yeah, I mean, odd bunch, but we see the national security state directly connected to Bob Cocaine Evans as late as the late 60s there. Henry Kissinger's right-hand man, 40 years later, his right-hand man, the national security advisor, like Henry there, to numerous presidents. His right-hand man, Major General Brent Scowcroft, his assistant, Scowcroft, would start a neo-process cult. So we see 40 plus years of all of these matters around this cult business. And again, that kind of ties right into those theories of the satanic serial killers of the Phoenix program come home. Because that's all wrapped up in those Nazi Satanist process folks right there within the national security state.
All one
decades.
All one tangled web.
Yep. And then, of course, you can't leave out Aquino, right? Mr. Special Forces himself, Special Bus Forces, maybe. That dude didn't pass any physical fitness tests. Look at that dilly bastard. But
just looking at that guy, like, how does, just literally and figuratively, how does he pass muster?
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm saying, dude. Like, he's not held to any actual, like, if I was just a straight-legged military dude myself there in the MPs, but I had a lot of friends in the Special Forces community and some MPs that served within the command of this Air Force Special Forces command. They were just MPs within that command there, but nonetheless, I would be offended that this dude ever claimed to have passed a physical fitness test within Special Forces. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Stowy bastard, but he was Mr. National Security as well. So these ideas, I don't think they're all that separated from, how an individual like Dahmer can call Walter Mondale, their President Carter's VP. Speaking of their national security advisor, Carter's national security advisor, well, Brzezinski, but Brzezinski was Kissinger and Rockefeller's underling, and Brzezinski's right-hand man recently was backing a process churchian out there in Los Angeles for mayor. So these matters seem interesting today, but this doughy bastard passed no such physical fitness test. But I'd have to say that when we look at Dahmer, he's probably born to that network, right? And the ideas of who is his daddy, what does he do? His dad was of a military industrial nature, if I'm not mistaken.
So yeah, he Had a BS in chemistry from Wisconsin Madison. What the hell did he do? Why was he? Because I know he was in. Dahmer was born in Wisconsin, but then they moved to Columbus, and then Jeffrey ended up moving back in with his grandmother in like West Allis area, just outside of Milwaukee, and that's kind of when the mayhem started. But I don't really know much about Lyle Dahmer's background.
Yeah, I've only been starting to dig into it because again, how does he call Walter Mont? How the you can get Walt's number all day long, sir, but why is Walt taking that call?
Yeah, especially in the evening.
You called me, no disrespect, but if you called me and say, "Oh, I need to get a tour of your that van you live in down by the river," I would say, "Well, get in line, buddy. That's never happening anytime soon." You know what I mean? Why wouldn't Walt tell him the same thing about his house there at the White House?
Yes.
I'm obviously just being facetious here, being ridiculous, but it is silly.
Clearly,
right?
it's very curious. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a concept that's often glossed over.
Yeah,
it's not only you can call all day, you can get the tour all day, but why the fuck is Walt taking that call?
It feels very Franklin-esque.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Franklin story? Very much.
I would say I know the main beats, but that's about it.
Are you aware the photographer of the child pornography in the Franklin story identified Michael Aquino as being involved in the mix, and at one point in time showing up to pick up in his presence, Rusty Nelson in his presence, a suitcase full of bearer bonds that were going to be delivered to the Nicaraguan Contras and Iran Contra.
That would not surprise me.
So all these folks, right? All these folks do hood rat shit together. Not only do they know each other, I think oftentimes in conspiracy culture, the serial killers are different than the drug traffickers are different than the other Satanists. They're all the same fuckers. Look at Aquino.
Well, yeah, I think they all know their dirty deeds, and that's part of their protection network. Is if I know your secrets and you know my secrets, our secrets are safe, right?
Speaking of secrets, sir, I might need some sort of cryptography device here, some sort of translations from our channel here. Bill Colby Ball Washer AI.
If E is a sphere, does it revolve around S? Drop that into ChatGPT. See what it says.
I feel like it's some sort of hypnotic programming from CIA AI Ball Washer Bill Colby. There. I'm just going to ignore and press forward, sir. Anyhow, these it is starting. Again, these matters. If we look back in the, again. How much terror? What was the impact? I mean, you were around when Dahmer got busted. What was that? 91.
Yeah, I was only 9 or 10.
So you were 9 or 10. I mean, all right. So we're the same age then. So yeah, all right. So when were you born, sir? 80,
82,
81, 82. All right. Well,
yep.
A couple years apart, but so I was born in 80 there. So I remember, and even in Ohio, dude, because obviously got a lot of press there because he once lived there. But there was a lot of back to that Franklin scandal and Johnny Gosh, I recall the whole matters of the milk carton kids and the paper boy stuff and all those kind of scare tactics, whether or not they were widespread or not, they were used as such, but to terrorize folks. And I think Dahmer was, my impression, especially looking back and even at the time, cognizant of what I could be at that age, but it was a very terrorizing effect on the community up there, and just even in Ohio, it was.
Yeah. So I grew up about the central part of the state. So I was still probably about 3 hours from Milwaukee, but obviously that made huge news. And, everybody growing up knew where Milwaukee was. As kids, we'd go to Brewers
Laverne
game.
and Shirley, right?
Laverne and Shirley. It was a little after our time, but everybody, Happy Days, Milwaukee, Laverne.
I'm only referencing because of Wayne's World, right? They do that parody of Laverne and Shirley when they go to Milwaukee.
That's right. Yeah. So being in the center part of the state, having the same name as Jeffrey Dahmer, you can imagine my reaction. Dude. So
yeah.
So it was, thinking I have an 8-year-old daughter now, and thinking I was 9 or 10 at that time, and learning of Dahmer's misdeeds. I couldn't imagine her processing what Dahmer did and the details of which. So growing up, in Wisconsin in the 90s, hearing about the Dahmer case, it just kind of floors me to think
Typical. Maybe we got a suspect in some of those crimes here. Our channel, he's from Milwaukee.
Our channel, maybe he is the bastard child of Bill Colby and
he's the bastard child of Jeffrey Dahmer. Maybe. Holy shit.
You know, I wondered about that. Do you think that Jeffrey Dahmer actually sired any children's or any children? You know, I know he was into dudes, but you know, sometimes there's some crossover.
Well, was the interest in dudes at least real, not maybe expressly, but at least or exclusively, but maybe related to Crowleyism, because Crowley speaks about abusing the young men as part of gaining power and financial success. So, in your magic rituals. So, you know, these young boys, I often think are, you know, there's obviously a sexual nature to it because it is sex ritual magic as well. But I don't, when we look at these matters, I don't think these fellows look at themselves as homosexuals. John Wayne Gacy did not.
Well, he was married. He thankfully didn't have any kids that we know of, right?
Right. Well, I mean, again, we didn't know Bill. I mean, again, it's obviously my allegations and supposition, but again, I built a circumstantial evidence to dispute or to argue that Bill Colby is in Burlington, Vermont. At the same time, the unknown fatherhood of you know, the future serial killer Ted Bundy is also in Vermont. So, in the same town, not a big town, sir, not a very big town, especially at that time.
What do you have pulled up here for us?
Oh, that's Peter Levenda on his
that's
Discovery
Levenda.
Channel OTO ritual.
What he was doing? Okay, I see now. Yep.
Yep, 2008. I'll put a link in the show notes for this. You know, it's a brief. They describe the whole OTO ritual. They're having OTO folks do this ritual on TV and whatnot. That's obviously Peter Levenda. There's really no question about it. Can you dispute that, sir? Would you agree that is in fact Peter Levenda?
From the Discovery documentaries I've witnessed Peter Levenda, and that looks to be him.
Did you know he goes back with his friendship with John Podesta, not just along with To the Stars Academy and Tom DeLonge and all that nonsense, but they go back to like 78. They were working for the same software company.
Was Podesta involved in TSA?
Oh yeah, that's some emails that came out in the Podesta emails. He had emails with Podesta, had emails with Levenda and DeLonge in the To the Stars Academy.
And DeLonge too. Okay.
Yeah, the Freemason. He's pretty proud Freemason. He has it on his guitar.
Really?
His father was an aerospace executive, et cetera. So kind of the same patterns. But we see they go back to 78 when this young man just happens to go invade a Nazi compound down in Chile, Colonia Dignidad, I believe it was 78. He's working for a software company. He creates an international incident. The State Department has to negotiate his release, and they pick him up at the airport in Miami when he flies back. What he's doing down there is never really described, even in Peter's own recountings of it. But nonetheless, it's interesting to find out. Again, back to the White Witch of the Ozarks there, Laz, he advised me a number of years back to looking at some of these matters that he was working for a software company at that time, the same software IT company that Podesta was working for. Now, if you're looking at software IT companies and thinking, oh, they're just doing computers. Well, at that very same time, we're talking about these software IT companies, the Finders cult was operating a software IT company that was employed on a contract basis with the CIA or a cutout basis, whichever way you look at it.
Plot thickens.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Your favorite uncle. That is a great point. And this is one I lean on all the time to point out that we recognize here in America that our politicians are disregarded. In other nations, like let's say Haiti, the Haitis are obviously the leader of Haiti, that dictator is a voodoo witchcraft guy. We don't have those same opinions here in America, but the same status applies. The Clintons, for example, major occultists, Billary there, they went on their honeymoon to Haiti for the voodoo, as they claimed. So in her own book. And Podesta, her sidekick, the man who's been running the Democratic Party and since the wake of Vince Foster's death. In fact, he was put in charge in the White House of the war room. And I don't want to get into those details right now, but if I identified all the people in that war room of Vince Foster's strange death the same day that old Slick Willie fires the FBI director, well, you'd know all the names from the Obama and Biden administrations. They're still around. Anyhow, Podesta sees his power in the wake of Bill Clinton's childhood friend Vince Foster's murder and untimely death there, and he never really let go of it. Him and his brother Tony would run the Democratic Party still to this day.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And in those emails, so in doing so, Podesta's been the senior advisor to Obama and the Bidens, and he was the head of Clinton's campaign there in 2008 and would have been the Secretary of State I'm sorry, 2016 as well. He's the one who gave you remember when she wouldn't come out? She was too drunk to come out and say she lost. So he gave her whatever resignation speech, whatever the fuck you call that. But he would go on to be the senior advisor. So in those emails, the Yale University head librarian writes John Podesta and says he needs a thelemic favor. That thelemic favor is not, hey, would you go down in the hall and give me a cup of sugar from the neighbor or whatever, whatever that, who knows. That thelemic favor was a one-on-one meeting with Barack Obama, who Podesta was the senior advisor to at the time. But you can't use an adjective like thelemic favor unless there's context or understanding with the party in which you're communicating that with.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you might have some context for that, but to your normal person, yeah, they're not going to understand what that means.
So obviously the Yale librarian and John Podesta have some thelema business in between one another, and Barack Obama is somehow associated in some regard with that matter.
Well, when you say Yale, the first thing that comes up in any conspiracist's mind is the Skull and Bones. So is there any Skull and Bones tie into the Podesta ranks?
No, but they did have a very interesting upbringing. So they're actually from Chicago. And are you familiar with the Speaker of the House for the Bush administration? When it was Republican Speaker of the House back then, the Republicans had majority early on in the Bush administration. Dennis Hastert. I got my kid dealers mixed up with brain hole for a second.
Yep.
Dennis Hastert.
Denny, yep.
Yep. He's such an ardent kid diddler. When he got busted, well after his time in politics, he'd already retired. He got busted for structuring payments to his victims. Structuring payments was taking out $9,998 multiple times, and the feds were like, "Hey, buddy, you're going right under the $10,000 limit. What the fuck are you doing?" And he says, "I'm paying off these kids I've been paying off for 34 years." When he was a high school wrestling coach in Chicago, back before he was in politics. So after he got busted, did I think 2.5 years on that stint for those financial crimes, not the dead ones. He then he demanded the money back from his victims.
Oh, man.
You fucking kidding me?
What a dirtball.
So, he grew up with the Podesta brothers. They would go to this weird summer camp together in Japan. I got a lot of ideas on it, but they do have a weird background.
Interesting.
Not Skull and Bones though. Not Skull and Bones. Not. They're Georgetown guys. They're Jesuits, if you will.
Okay. So the fact that it took you that long to come up with Denny Hastert's name is emblematic of what's a matter with our system, because that should be top of mind awareness for anybody.
Fuck yeah, dude. He was 3 heartbeats away from the president, and at that time he'd raped a lot of children, and he was paying them off at that time still too.
Yeah. Tragic. Damn. And then he demanded the money back like a scumbag.
Yeah, dude. He pulled what I like to call pulling a Jared Fogle. Are you familiar with the Subway diddler?
The Subway dude, yeah.
Not the Subway train stations, but the Subway sandwich corporation.
The $5 footlong guy.
Yeah, dude. He gave a lot of $5 footlongs, didn't he? So when he went to prison for some really disturbing shit, dude, and that situation never gets discussed about. So Subway is largely franchises, right? It's not largely corporate owners, it's largely franchise owners. So they were shipping this dude out to franchise owners. Do you know how many franchise owners, it turns out in the court documents, complained to the corporation and they didn't do shit about it? For years, dude. He had so many incidents and so many public events at different franchises, getting real inappropriate with some largely young girls. But nonetheless, those stories actually go back to Indiana University. When he's been fat, he was like the guy who had all the pornography back when it was on VHS. I had some dudes in the Air Force I served with, knew him from college there at IU, but these were the stories I heard from there. But anyhow, Fogle would get busted, and when he's in prison, dude, he sues the parents of one of his victims, demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars, saying, they're responsible for him raping their daughter. Make that make sense. That's an actual lawsuit he filed. And Dennis Hastert's in that same bucket of scumbaggery, if you ask me.
That's lowest of the low right there. That's like straight to the wood chipper behavior.
Dude, right? I mean, you don't get much lower than that, right? Demanding money back, suing the victim's parents. He said he only raped their daughter because their 8-year-old daughter, or whatever, because it was their fault. What, dude?
Unbelievable.
How's that even a thing, right?
How does that even make the light of day? How does that make it to an official a legal document. Ridiculous.
I totally agree, sir. I totally agree. And when we talk about these matters of ridiculous natures of our society, I like to call it Muppet world. We live in Muppet world 2025. We live in a post-meme world. What used to be meme became reality, and now we live in a time after that time. It's called Muppet world, run by Muppets.
Muppet world.
And one of those Muppets, like I said, describing the president who's a good friend, or those Papa Doc fellas, those wizards and dictators from Haiti who have been in real tight with the Clintons for decades, by the way. We think of them as dictator wizards, but Barack Obama doesn't get that description, does he?
Somehow has made a squeaky clean image.
Yeah, dude. There's actually, I remember. Have you ever seen this photo before?
I've seen this photo floating around. I don't know where it came from or what the alleged backstory is, but it clearly.
I can help you out with that one, sir.
Go.
So, this was, I believe, this was in the September of 2016. It was disregard July or August 2016. I think it was originally posted to Instagram, and this was before the Podesta emails because it got scrubbed afterwards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the woman who posted this on her Instagram of her art gallery business, right? She's an artist in a town called Huntington, Vermont. She's from a nearby town of Richmond, Vermont, which is about 10 miles outside of Burlington. Richmond is, and Huntington's about 7 miles down the road from that through the mountains. She posted on her Instagram this picture, and then obviously the interwebs and Reddit. Back then I was still on Reddit. Reddit went nuts, and on top of that, they she was then asked, like, is that Obama, right? And she confirmed it was Obama. She did not confirm the location when she took the picture, but I do find it interesting she was from Huntington, Vermont. That's a very strange place, sir. Huntington, Vermont. In fact, I just did a show kind of discussing some of that high weirdness recently.
So
that's my home away from home. I said Burlington, but really that's where my grandfather's from. His wife there is from, her family's from Huntington there. So, and that's where I spent my summers growing up every summer. And out of my Air Force career, I spent 2 weeks of my 30 days of leave every year, at least 2 weeks up there in Huntington, Vermont. It's a nice town, but last thing I expected was, again, she's not from there. She's from a neighboring town, but nonetheless, she lives there and runs that art gallery today there. And I said, whoa, that's strange.
So go back to the Obama photo. That's supposed to be an actual photograph, or is that
I
rendition? Yeah, because it almost looks like AI now, but if it was posted in 2016.
No, that I see that now. I pulled up. Someone has messed with that picture. Let me pull up the actual picture.
Okay.
I didn't see. I looked at the little image when I clicked on. I see that now. Someone's messed with that one, huh?
Okay. Yeah.
This is the original photo.
Okay. All right, but she didn't. She could not confirm where this was or when this was.
She would not confirm neither.
Do we know who the gentleman is in the background there?
I've seen some supposition. It's a congressman out of Mississippi. I would argue no. He's more than likely some sort of security character.
Okay. He's got a Chicago jacket on where Obama's from.
Right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. So, but I would argue more he's probably in some sort of security function. They're not all Secret Service were suit and jacket.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right.
So, today this is often described as obviously fake news and whatnot, but again, I'm still looking for the actual. It's been scrubbed from the Internet Archive. Did you know you could scrub shit from the Internet Archives?
I know that they had some kind of security breach, I believe, last year, and a lot of stuff had gone missing, and we're not sure exactly what happened, but was it a cover-up operation? More than likely,
right? Without finding the original post, and again, it's been scrubbed. I don't want to put the lady on blast. However, she did confirm that was Obama's there, and again, he has an interesting heritage. Who is his daddy, and what does he do? You know what I mean?
Apparently, was he Indonesian, or where is he from?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I respect a man who uses his brain hole for God's intended purposes, other than a paperweight, which most folks use it for. He is definitely not African, and he most certainly seems to be, by all evidence supporting, pointing to which exhibiting the son of an Islamic sex cult leader by the name of Muhammad Subud. So again, back to these matters of these wizardries, right? If he's the son of a sex cult leader, well, why wouldn't he be running around with some fucking wizard outfit, right? That makes a lot more sense. The context. So his pal Oprah is also associated with the Chicago outlet of the Subud cult. And do you remember the birth certificate?
I remember the birth certificate. Yes, the trutherism. Yeah, I know he grew up between Jakarta and Hawaii, right? Allegedly.
Yeah, so that cult leader, his folks were most certainly associated, directly proven, established with members of that cult. I can't confirm they were members, but their social circles were members. And Lolo Soetoro, his stepfather, was the Rockefeller oil man.
Because he went by Barry Soetoro originally, or
that's correct, sir.
In his adolescence, yeah.
That is correct, sir.
Okay.
And his mother's CIA. His mother's CIA. Her father's CIA.
I thought there was allegations or conspiracy theories that his mother was some kind of CIA sex kitten or something like that.
No, it's been documented. Her father as well, and they're Hinkley's. Like John Hinckley.
Yeah, like the assassin of. Well, the attempted assassin.
Well, yeah. He's they all know each other, but Loretta Fuddy here dies in a mysterious plane wreck. The aircraft was a small island jumper they have there with the props in Hawaii. She worked for the health department as an appointee. She's the one that released the birth certificate. This is maybe 6 months after, 12 months after that incident of release in the birth certificate. There's video evidence. I don't know if it still exists. There used to be cell phone evidence of someone in the water landing. So the plane made an emergency water landing in between the Hawaiian Islands. And it was all government folks on the plane, 9 or 10 of them. She's in the water on the video footage. She has a life preserver on. They all have life preservers on in the water. All the occupants of the plane and the pilots. She's the only one who didn't make it back to shore.
Mm-hmm. Curiously.
Yep. And on top of that, she was the head of the Subud cult in America.
And so she is the one who certified the Hawaiian birth certificate that is on file. Okay.
Yes, sir. She is the one that signed off on the 7-layer digital birth certificate that was allegedly from 1961.
Unbelievable.
Right.
And she was involved in the Subud cult.
She was the head of it.
In America.
She held the national conferences of it here in America.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah, they all worship the astrotheological aspects and various ancient alien cargo cult philosophies. Yeah, dude. So these matters of who is folks' daddies and what do they do not only applies to the Society of Cincinnati, because that's obviously a paternal knighthood heritage situation. But again, we see these matters apply across the spectrum of our society, I would argue, and that is why I like to play that game here.
Mm-hmm. One question for you, since you've done so much research on and maybe this will be the final question because I got to wrap up soon.
Yes, sir.
The Society of
bring this in for a landing force. Once again, are you in my brain hole? Because you're thinking the same thing.
Well, on the same wavelength as you, JJ.
Go ahead, sir.
As far as the Society of Cincinnati, were they involved in any German immigration and resettlement in what you would consider the Northwest Territory, or I guess New America, or whatever you want to consider that? Probably after the 1850s.
I would say 100%, sir. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I'm just curious for my own.
There's a few things I'm certain on in this world, sir. And one of those things is I'm certain on I'm not the vice president. I have a very strong alibi for the death of the Pope. And I'm very certain the Society of Cincinnati started this country and still runs it today.
All right. Yeah, just, my personal heritage.
When we're talking about these migrations, for example, yes, sir, go ahead.
I was just going to say my grandfather, or it'd be my grandfather's grandfather and his dad, made it from a northern, like that, Newport Indian Mound. Anyway, they made it from northern Germany I'm not sure exactly where they landed. I could not find any manifest with their names on it, but they came through Ohio and then up into the Mississippi
Yep.
River to a place called Fountain City, Wisconsin, and then migrated east from there to kind of set out. And I was wondering what the mechanism was for as far as sponsorship and the like, and who was involved in that, and if there was any Cincinnati involvement in that. I know that I had found something. I'd sent it to Recluse, and this was probably a few years ago, where I found something about a Cincinnati society helped in getting these immigrants to, they were farm laborers, were not, high society people, to Wisconsin for this. And I was kind of curious, like, is that the same society, or is there another mutual aid society involved, or is it all kind of a web from the Society of Cincinnati?
What year are we talking? 1830, 1835?
This would have been later for my grandfather, but
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
probably
I apologize for stepping on you there.
1850s or 1860s.
All right. Well, fair enough. I'm not exactly certain on that migration, but what I can tell you is this: General Arthur St. Clair, the last executive of the Continental Congress, a very close associate of General George Washington, obviously, but he, when a descendant of those Roslyn Chapel, St. Clair's of Knights Templar fame, he was a member of the Pennsylvania chapter, and again, a lot of the German heritage that started the colony of Pennsylvania. So we see a lot, and I'm just saying that this is just how human nature works. That when you see those folks, you don't see a lot of Scots-Irish on those migrations, and that's why.
Yeah, I wondered about that too, because it was all German, Prussian, yeah, all from that same area. All right,
yeah, and we got some. There is some Vance folks in there, that are in the Pennsylvania branch as well, and that Joseph Vance Jr., for example, his father was part of the Pennsylvania chapter, and he started Fort Vance, which became the first free city in America, Washington, Pennsylvania, in September of 1783 after the Treaty of Paris. But what I'm saying there is we see that Northwest Passage out of that Pennsylvania chapter, because those are the folks that go start the Cincinnati project that becomes from Los Santaville, which was the original name of Cincinnati. They changed it to Cincinnati and then started the state of Ohio. That became the Northwest Passage and gateway into all these other settlements and migrations. And again, it was operated by the Pennsylvania largely German folks. So that's why we see that I think that's why we see the favor of such a migration in German populations, as opposed to seeing Scots-Irish folks moving up there from the Carolinas, the Appalachians, et cetera, right?
That's a puzzle piece.
Yeah, so if you can, I appreciate your time, sir, and thank you again for joining me tonight. A little GCD. Bring in for landing here, Jeff. If you can provide some closing statements in our conversation, but first, what's the Newport Indian Mound?
That is so there's a place called Wisconsin Dells just outside Devil's Lake there, and this was just an example of how you can visit any county park, state park, a lot of the local city parks in Madison, and stumble upon an Indian Mound. So, yeah,
nice.
So yeah, if you want to follow me, Badgerlands Legends on Instagram and Facebook, try to at least throw up one post per day on something strange I found in Wisconsin, legends, lore, folklore, UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, haunted places, and the like. And I dabble a little bit into parapolitics, as you can tell.
Sure. No, I like your style, sir. And I got a links for these matters in the show notes. And I see that you do a lot of mound coverage, and I do respect that as well, for sure. More so. I mean, I like the parapolitics myself, but, I got into Operation GCD here as a result of my study into the mounds and the Society of Cincinnati. So that's obviously still one of my obviously focal points and favorites. But one other question I'd like to ask you, sir, here before we depart, and that is, I'll have to get back to you. I have no idea what I did with my Bill Colby, Ted Bundy picture, other than that one video. Oh, you know what? I can just pause the video. But while I'm doing that, let me ask you this question.
Sure.
I done just forgot. Hold on one second, sir. I done forgot what that question was. It'll come right back to me. Now, so on these adventures you've taken in Wisconsin, two questions, I guess. On these adventures you've taken in Wisconsin, what is the weirdest thing you've encountered? Speaking of high weirdness and adventures, as we started off this discussion tonight here, on the Operation GCD Fridays, and I thank folks of the interwebs for joining us here for this discussion. But we just started here on both of our affinities for how we met through our mutual friend Recluse there, and his affinities as well for adventures and high weirdness. And we talk about all this weird shit happening in and around mounds, mound sites, and the high concentration of some of the weirder ones, these effigy ones. They're of a very ritualistic purpose in Wisconsin. And again, the modern day occultists seemingly recognizing that from the OTO folks you identified. And I appreciate it, man, with details, sir. And that's a detail I did not know, but it is a great one to have relative to these modern day occultists in the mounds. So what is the weirdest matter of high weirdness you've encountered up there in your adventures in Wisconsin?
So maybe the weirdest experiences, and this will tie it all together. I went up to a place that is known as the most haunted house in Wisconsin, and it is called Summerwind, and it's in Land O'Lakes. It's little more than rubble now. Unfortunately, it was a great manor at one point, and I believe it was owned by the Department of the Interior after he. Yeah, here we go. The Lamont Mansion. So,
yeah, all right.
I knew the place was going to be put up for sale. I knew the paranormal investigative team out of Appleton that ran tours there. So I hooked up with them. I said, "Yeah, I want to check it out. Is there any camping on the property?" He said, "Oh yeah, there's plenty of available area to pitch your tent." So.
No shit, just scattered camping, not a campground. You can just kind of camp wherever.
Not a campground, just around, around
primitive
around
camping, as we call it. I like that style.
Yep, I just brought my truck, my tent, and my air mattress, and there
you go, sir.
I got
how
there.
You don't go to a campground. That's how you camp right there.
Yeah, I was like, I want to camp right there because how many people can say this? So anyway, I get there and I talked to the team there. The guy that I know, the leader of the team, he's not there yet. And they're like, "Oh yeah, you can set your tent up right there." And it was right next to a freshly used porta-john. I'm like, "You got anything a little further away from that porta?" It's like, "Oh yeah, there's a little clearing over where your truck is parked."
Yeah, you don't want to be downwind from a porta-john.
Yeah. So I'm like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm already parked there. I can just throw my tent up." So it's a little clearing in the woods, right? Flat top, like perfect spot for a tent, right? So I get it all set up, get all my stuff in there, and then it's starting to rain, and then everybody kind of gathers around the fire to tell the ghost stories and start the investigation. And then the leader of that team, Craig, he starts telling the background of the Summerwind Mansion and all the associated haunts, and then he's talking about the Indian mounds on the property. And then he looks at me, he looks at my truck, he looks at my tent. And he says, and Jeff just pitched his tent atop the Indian mound. And
no shit.
I was like, I guess I already committed. So I ended up sleeping on top of that mound that night. I had a restful sleep. So
I was about to say, did you have any encounters from any creatures? Or
we had some I'm not sure how familiar you are with the paranormal investigation, but we had some active responses at the site from what seemed to be something wanting to communicate. As far as specific to that mound, no, relatively peaceful night.
Interesting. So weird shit did not happen in and around a mound for you that night then?
It did not.
Well, I'll tell you some weird shit happened to me when I found out where Bill Colby came from and who was his daddy and what he do. Because his father was not only an Army colonel, but that man's second great-grandfather was a captain in the Society of Cincinnati out of the Massachusetts chapter. And that captain out of the Massachusetts chapter that fought in the wars of 1776, his grandmother, Colby, was involved in the Salem witch trial business. Maybe his grandfather, one of the Colbys.
All right.
Isn't that weird?
It all ties together.
Yeah, dude. What do you think here? Bill Colby, father of Ted Bundy. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
Striking resemblance. That's all I got to say.
Right, dude. Striking resemblance. The proximity of when this dude's mother got impregnated here was, he's in town there in a small town.
Now, if
law school,
I would just say, if you open somebody's family photo album and you had pictures of these two gentlemen early in life and said, "Oh yeah, this is Grandpa George and this is his son Jack," you'd be like, "Yeah, checks out."
Yeah, but instead, what we're looking at here, sir, is Bill and Ted's Murderous Adventure. But no, I appreciate your analysis on that. So no, I appreciate your time, sir. I'll put these links in the show notes for folks, and I thank you again for joining me here tonight to get a little GCD, and hopefully we can have some more conversations of these natures in the future.
Absolutely, anytime.
And I just got a couple quick plugs here before we call her in here. I got Operation GCD Wednesdays, an occult and or esoteric review of the 1993 cinematic masterpiece, Striking Distance. Watch out, Fozzie Bear is armed and dangerous, folks. But Operation GCD Sundays on my Patreons, which the link will be in the show notes. Hey, there we go. Patreon.com/Operation GCD, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Times. We're going to do the anatomy of a mound cover-up. It's my Lewis and Clark Muppets, sir. They're out there venturing around surveying maps and mounds and stuff.
Looking forward to that one.
Highly recommend folks check those out. And are you familiar with that specific mound site? If I can share some details with you as we close here. So let me bring up a picture then.
All right.
It's that mound site was buried in the Tennessee Valley kind of authority campaigns of building all these dams across America, and specifically the Midwest, and damming up projects and building these man-made lakes. Well, that one today says the bottom of East Fork Lake in Claremont County, Ohio. We know about it courtesy of that map. It was numerous surveys done by the Society of Cincinnati folk. And it's interesting, right? It's a fucking, looks like a Hanukkah. They call it the Hanukkah mound. It looks like a menorah, though, right? And an oil lamp.
Yep, definitely.
You know, I have a hard time saying that being a former Mormon. They're like, wait a second, buddy, that's Mormon stuff. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers got sued, and they were told not, I repeat, not, I'm not the vice president. They were told not to do that. Court injunction. And they said, yeah, we're going to flood it anyway. So, you know, there's an intentional cover up of this ancient history, sort of like we've been discussing tonight. You know, it's not just the inadvertent or, you know, not inadvertent, obviously intentional building and probably getting the power from those specific sites they're building on, as I imagine, and their understandings of which. But there's those matters that destroy the mounds, and then there's these other intentional matters of cover-ups like flooding these mounds. All of these man-made lakes across America, and that project's from the 30s to the 70s. That one was 68. They all buried in the ancient history of America in these valleys.
All right. Looking forward to that episode.
Yes, sir. And any last commentary or
no, it's been real.
Concerns?
I would say don't fuck with the mounds.
And stay away from haunted dolls, folks. And on that note, catch you next time.
Well, that's it. That's the show here, folks. So the next time you're out on the town, visiting your local watering holes, or perhaps just meandering around, and you hear the unmistakable sounds of metal clanking, and you spot signs of a disturbance, but check your six. Look in that garbage can, 'cause you never can tell. The GCDs may be loose in your town.